As a matter of fact, most Republican voters are fed up with the weakless, feckless nothing from Republicans in Congress. And we are not giving people anything to vote for.
Donald Trump and Maga Republicans were dealt another high-profile public humiliation when Republican Speaker Mike Johnson finally relented and allowed President Biden to sign into law 3 months of additional government funding, avoiding the government shutdown that Trump publicly demanded. As a consequence of this, MAGA cultist and top Trump ally Marjorie Taylor Greene is furious, and she is once again publicly calling out Republican Speaker Mike Johnson and saying that the Republican Party deserves to lose the upcoming election. And I agree with her. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to talk about in this video. As you know, Marjorie Taylor Greene is one of the primary belligerents in a long-simmering MAGA civil war, which really began since they took the House majority back in January of 2023. And at times, that long-simmering MAGA civil war has boiled forth into high-profile spectacles of dysfunction and stupidity. But for the longest time, Marjorie Taylor Greene, her arch nemesis has been the current Republican Speaker, Mike Johnson. And I should say, for context, this government shutdown thing it works in their best interests, avoiding a government shutdown, that is, because they almost certainly would have suffered politically and electorally if they'd allowed the government to shut down, basically if Trump had his way. So they should be thankful that Mike Johnson came to his better senses. But the fact that Donald Trump didn't get what he wanted, and some people interpret this as Republicans folding to Democratic superiority, really has Marjorie Taylor Greene triggered. So I want to play some clips in which she calls the Republicans out, takes shots at Mike Johnson, and says that the GOP should lose the upcoming election, all of which is music to my ears.
And as a matter of fact, most Republican voters are fed up with the weakless, feckless nothing from Republicans in Congress. And we are not giving people anything to vote for. And
She's right. She's right about all that. They're feckless, they are weak, and they're certainly not giving Republican voters anything to vote for. But that has nothing to do with the government shutdown so much as it is their inability to work in good faith with Democrats on common sense solution. Again, all this comes down to is Donald Trump and MAGA Republicans expect the Republican House majority to be the tail that wags the dog in divided government, even though they're outnumbered. President Biden is the president of the United States. Democrats control the Senate, and the House Republican majority is so incompetent and dysfunctional that it's really not much of a majority to begin with. So I don't know why they just assume that they have the God-given divine mandate to dictate terms to more competent and a more coalesced opposition party in the form of the Democrats. And that's why they keep running into these issues. Another clip from Marjorie Taylor Greene. This is when she phoned into Steve Bannon's War Room podcast. And she calls out the Republicans. She said they should lose re-election, but she also tries to defend herself because she is also up for re-election. So it's one of those things where, like, hey, you should elect me, and I want you to hear all the good stuff that I got done, which isn't really anything at all, and we'll get into that. But also, no other Republican deserves to win.
Yeah, it's an absolute failure. Biggest failed Congress that I know of. I'll tell you what I'm running on. I'm going back to my district. I have plenty of things to run on. I single-handedly impeached Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas because I brought my impeachment resolution to the floor, and I told my entire conference, I said it publicly, and I told the press, I will bring this privilege resolution to the floor every single week until this House impeaches Mayorkas. I did that, and I got it done, and I have that hanging on the wall in my office. I know what else I'm running on. I tried to impeach Joe Biden. I introduced impeachment articles over and over again. Most corrupt president in our history. I have stood against the corruption and the swamp. I didn't vote for any of this garbage that they tried to get me to vote on. And I stood for my principles, and I stood for my constituents, and I stood for my district. In the most pressure I've ever been in under my entire life. So I know what I'm running on. I've got plenty to go back to my district to talk about. And I'm also running on what we can do if we elect President Trump. That is the most important thing to run on, because the truth is, and everyone needs to understand this, I share the anger and frustration, and I don't think Republicans deserve to be reelected to hold.
There you go. She thinks that the Republicans don't deserve to be reelected to hold the House majority. And she says it's the most failed Congress. And again, I agree with her on both those fronts. I agree. Her party doesn't deserve to hold the majority. As a matter of fact, as far as I'm concerned, there is no room in the United States government for an elected Republican. I think every single elected Republican in the country should lose re-election unless they have repudiated Donald Trump and MAGA Republicans and have acknowledged that the Democratic Party is the better governing party. In the age of Trump, I think that all elected Republicans suck. I'd probably go a bit further than she would. But I agree with her there. And I also agree that it is the most failed Congress in American history. And it's true. It's actually backed up by the data. Even in divided government, some people say, well, listen, of course it's going to be a failed government, a failed Congress, because it's divided government. You have disagreements among the parties, even compared to other times of divided government. Even when Donald Trump was president. When Donald Trump was president and Nancy Pelosi, a Democrat, was Speaker of the House, they were able to work together in better faith, than Republicans, MAGA Republicans, have been able to do with President Biden, because MAGA Republicans now are even more obstructionist than they have ever been. As bad as Democrats rightly despise Donald Trump, we were willing to work with him in good faith, even if he would be seen as getting a political victory. Look at all the bipartisan COVID stimulus that was done during 2020, even though it was an election year, even though we tried to impeach Donald Trump, we were still willing to deliver results for the American people. And if that meant working with Donald Trump to do so, so be it. But MAGA Republicans have a completely different philosophy where they hate Democrats so much that they are perfectly willing, they are gleefully willing to screw over their own constituents in order to stick it politically to the Democrats. Again, thus proving that elected Republicans are just inferior to elected Democrats and not deserving of your vote. So we agree with all of that. Of course, when she's talking about her record, I impeached Alejandro Mayorkas. Yeah, but it didn't go to the Senate, so it was a waste of time. By the way, you failed in a spectacular humiliation in round one. It was a high-profile defeat. You barely squeaked an impeachment in the House. It didn't go anywhere in the Senate. And by the way, it got criticism from numerous Republicans and conservative scholars saying you are opening the floodgates because you're effectively impeaching the Secretary of Homeland Security over a policy disagreement, not because he committed treason, bribery, or another high crime and misdemeanor. So what she's effectively done is give license to Democrats. If they take the House majority and Donald Trump or a Republican wins the presidency again, Democrats can just start impeaching Republican cabinet members and Republican presidents over mere policy disagreements and not because they committed a high crime or misdemeanor. That's what she's done. In trying to impeach President Biden, she's repeatedly tried to impeach President Biden, but that didn't even make it to the impeachment effort, let alone the Senate. So she has nothing of consequence really to talk about. That's how much of a failure she is. That's the one area where we disagree. Is she thinks every other Republican has failed. No, she failed too. She failed spectacularly too because she cares more about impotent messaging than actually delivering results for her constituents. A Guardian article goes into this as well. You know, Marjorie Taylor Greene melts down over House Speaker. I don't think Republicans deserve to be reelected. And again, all of this is a consequence of Mike Johnson finally folding and allowing the government to stay funded, which again will help her and her party. In response to this continuing resolution, Taylor Greene said Republicans did not, quote, deserve to control the House. Quote, Mike Johnson is not our speaker. He is the speaker for the Democrats. I share the anger and frustration, and I don't think Republicans deserve to be reelected to hold the majority. Folks, that's where we are. That Marjorie Taylor Greene, for the most part, is providing a pretty eloquent reason or eloquent defense as to why Republicans, even if you're a conservative, even if you're a MAGA Republican, I've long said that if you're a principled conservative, or if you're a sane conservative, you shouldn't vote Republicans because they're not going to deliver you any results. Republican voters do better, whether they like it or not, when Democrats are in charge compared to when Republicans are in charge. But even if you're an unhinged MAGA Republican, I would argue that Marjorie Taylor Greene's giving you very good reasons not to vote for Republicans in this upcoming election. Do you really want to empower the rhinos like Mike Johnson? People who are going to, keep the government funded, to try to avoid electoral blowouts? Really? No, you don't want to reward them, do you? I think she's making a very eloquent case, which is probably the best case that Marjorie Taylor Greene's ever made. I love it. I love to see it. More of this, please. As you know, when Republicans are fighting one another, it's a good day for America because a unified Republican Party is even more dangerous than a disunified, dysfunctional Republican Party. And yeah, with the election rapidly approaching, I would love to see more of this. So in the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.